I didn't know because I had not yet come back and the translation hadn't been made available, was that in an 88-day period, at the point that he had asked them and they answered, and that was from the time that the leak had sprung, the actual gallonage of oil that had gone into the Gulf was 304 million gallons of oil, as opposed to the later figure, that BP came up with 200 and something million gallons. Horrendous enough. Now, what they had told him was, the problem here, and at the point they had spoken to him, they had not yet capped the well. They said, what looks to be very, very probable here is that this oil, this sheer volume, is going to enter the Gulf Stream. It will get into the Atlantic. The particulate and the gases from this petroleum are enormously toxic, and there's a number of components you're dealing with here. The particulate and the gases that will evaporate into the air along with...
Wait a minute. This is what he said, or this is what you're saying?
This is what they told him.
Got it. Okay.
That, in addition, we know to the core exit stuff that they're using, that the toxicity level of this is so gross for all life forms, meaning from the microscopic...
This is also what was printed in the news. This was in thousands and thousands of blogs and radio. How do we believe this part of what you're talking about?
I'm just going to tell you what they said. That the problem will be, and they were telling him this, I think, in late May and early June. This stuff will come down in rain. It's going to affect and be toxic, in some cases fatally toxic to not only sea life forms, but plant and human life forms. That the oil that people think has disappeared instead has been settling on the bottom of the ocean. This is going to create more problems. That this whole thing in the chain of cause and effect is going to, and then this is where you won't want me to get into it, but they said this is going to exacerbate climatic damage to such a high degree.
Why would I care about that? I just have an issue with lies and deception to the public.
Right. So, no, what they're saying is we are going to see, and probably in our lifetimes, the weather conditions on Earth be akin to what we would call primeval. The storms of all forms.
I believe that. I accept that.
When he was writing in the back in the 50s and in the 70s, when they told him specifically, you must not extract this petroleum and gas from your planet and mine these ores because you're setting up megaquakes, seaquakes, tsunamis, and the Earth will collapse from within. We have a phenomenon that's recently become more noticed, which is sinkholes. And one of the people who's, I think in England, did an article which I posted on my website where he correlated. He showed, the sinkholes I think are as widespread as China, Belize, Guatemala, Florida, Canada.
Are you talking about the one that just happened was it Guatemala or Mexico?
Well, I don't know what the latest one would be, but they've been occurring all over the place. And he went and did a little research and correlated that in every one of these areas, there had been mining and or oil extraction. And as 1976, I have it in the copyrighted dated books, they're saying that your Earth is going to collapse from within. Your megaquakes, you're sucking out this buffering, the synovial fluid of the planet and burning it up. Not only are you going to create the air pollution, but you're setting up these quakes and volcanic...
Well, it's not humanity that's setting up these things. It's the people in charge of the planet legally and financially that are doing this and getting away with it. And most of the population, I'm speaking for the population now, the ethos, most of the population feels very helpless and powerless to do anything to stop these people.
Yes, of course.
And agencies.
Look, those of us that think about these things, we know this. We agree about it. And it's like people can say, well, what's the point? Why do they tell them? Why are they telling this one Swiss guy? There's all sorts of questions, and I have my own answers for them. But what I'm trying to do in this whole thing is to say, look, this isn't about trying to prove that there's some cool guy that gets all this great information. Oh, isn't he nifty? If you, on some levels, we would all like to have some of the perks of his life, and we would not want to endure some of the downside, and I know this, personally a lot. So what's the point of all this? The point is that for better or for worse, calculated or miscalculated, a body of information has been presented to our world, which has indeed slowly and through much struggle and growing pains found its way, very slowly we could say, into some levels of public dissemination. You're helping with that. Other people are helping with that. Because this is as they say, true leadership will not come from the top down. This is going to have to emerge from the bottom up. And what we're seeing then, for those that want to struggle through it so that we own our own experience, our own progress, our own knowledge, our own conviction, and it isn't told to us by somebody that we're supposed to believe or accept, but that we vet this stuff, that we go in and do the work of saying, well, let's find out. When did this event happen? What were the details of it? What's the first known time that this could have occurred? When I gave you all that information on Io and Jupiter and these other things, the skeptics were trying to say, well, he got it from science journals. Well, the lead investigator and his team were in Switzerland at the time this man went on this contact and got all this information about Jupiter and Io and all the rest of this stuff. They knew that he was living in a rundown farmhouse 45 kilometers outside of Zurich with no libraries, no newsstands, I don't think he even had television at that point. And they were observing and watching this guy. The people, they interviewed the postmaster. What kind of books does he get? Magazines? Well, no, Mr. Meier gets letters. So much was done to try to find out, how could this guy be scooping NASA? How is it that Lieutenant Colonel Wendell Stevens could say, I had this information in my possession as I was returning to the States on March 9th, 1979, and 3 days later NASA made their brand new announcements. I showed this to Major Rudolph Pestalozzi, U.S. Air Force retired, and O. Richard Norton, who was the director of the Flandreau Planetarium prior to these other predictions occurring. We signed off and stuck it in the safe because some of these had not yet happened, and we knew we couldn't publicize these. It was a mistake that Meier gave us everything instead of just the Jupiter. This was an investigation. This is a human story with mistakes and accidents and people giving people grief, but enough of it where it's copyrighted, it's in a book. Okay, take that to the bank. Now what do we do with it? And it's still being vetted. It's still being corroborated, where you can say, here's this book, here's this published document. I have one on the website that I flipped out when I saw it. What was it? Okay, I had been floating on the internet, and I found a thing from National Geographic about this Iceman mummy. I think his name was pronounced Ötzi or something like that they discovered in 1991 in the Austrian Alps. And something triggered, wait a minute, I read something. And I went and I found, here was this information in the Meier material about this Iceman from 1991. Now, if I can tell you the story, now this is why I go goofy on this. Okay, Meier has this contact, and they're talking about different things, and the guy says, well, by the way, August or September, they're going to discover this frozen Iceman high up in the Austrian Alps, and blah-de-blah, he's about 5,100 years old. Okay, I'm not going to tell you the rest yet. Fast forward to, they discover this Iceman mummy. Okay. So then in 1996, Meier publishes it where there's a copyrighted version of this, the same information, but they put it in a copyrighted book form, along with a bunch of other stuff. Tons of information. Oh, well, maybe he went and backdated it, right? Here's where the other shoe hits the floor. In 2001, 5 years after this document is officially copyrighted, published, the Italian and Austrians, whatever, they bring the mummy into a hospital in Italy to do a CAT scan. They want to figure out how the guy died. What do they find out? There is a fractured skull, and there's an arrowhead in his back. Well, logically, they figure somebody killed the guy. They shot him with an arrow. Case closed. So I go back to that document I had, and there is this question and answer. Hasn't changed in all the years. So Billy says, how did this guy die 5,100 years ago? Now we're talking about, snowstorms, blizzards, grizzly bears, drowning, food poisoning, natural causes, dysentery, you name it. So he says, well, he had an epileptic seizure and fell backwards and fell off of this, area and landed on one of his arrows. 5 years in print before they bring this guy in. So I'm talking